Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Manulife Business Success Series webinar on what students are doing to help businesses through the pandemic. My name is Allison Mitchell, and I'm the Program Manager for the Access Student Talent Program at the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee people, and we seek a renewed relationship based on the foundation of mutual understanding and respect. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors. A special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership, and this month's presenting sponsor, Future Focus, Inc. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools that they need to thrive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that come up throughout the session, please feel free to type them into the chat box. If they are technical in nature, then our team will get back to you momentarily. If the questions are for our panelists, we will have a Q&A session after our discussion. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's webinar in a follow-up email. I would now like to invite Michael Schneiders, President of Future Focus, Inc., to introduce today's speaker panel.
Thank you, Allison. Future Focus is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series, where the theme is focused on talent. I have the privilege of introducing today's speakers panel. Linda Crawford has worked in the experiential learning environment for over 15 years in the not-for-profit and post-secondary education sectors. Linda is currently the Associate Director, Work Integrated Learning at Conestoga College, where she is responsible for the teams that support students to gain hands-on experience as part of their educational programming, including professional practice and field placements and student-facing co-op. Linda is a member of the Quality Council for Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning Canada. Scott Keller works as the link between businesses, faculty, and students in developing experiential learning opportunities for classrooms at Wilfrid Laurier University. This role includes developing projects, internships, or placements with businesses based on their needs and matching this with the appropriate student group. Scott has previously worked within the co-op departments at both WLU and Conestoga College and is a part-time instructor at Conestoga as well. Margaret Johnson is a business developer in cooperative education with the University of Waterloo. She also serves as a Kitchener City Councillor and is a former Kitchener Public School Board trustee. Margaret holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from Wilfrid Laurier University and a Bachelor of Education in Adult Education from Brock University. And moderating today's session is Allison Mitchell, Access Student Talent Program Manager with the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce. I just want to make a quick story in regards to this. My organization went into a project with Conestoga College with one of the programs where they developed the team of students developed a roadmap for business automations and operational efficiencies for my company. After that project was done, we hired 2 of the students on to help implement that project. And since then, they've graduated as of December and now are permanent members of our team. Excellent access to talent and excellent way of being able to move some of our strategic priorities forward. So I am very much a believer in what these people are about to talk to us about today. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Alice.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for sharing that great story of how students have provided value to your business. We're so happy today to bring this webinar to you through our Access Student Talent Program. The Chamber's Access Student Talent Program is here to help small businesses connect with post-secondary students in a variety of ways, and that can be through co-op work terms, through field placements, capstones, in-class projects. There's lots of different ways that businesses can work with students. And so today's focus is really going to be on those examples for how students have been helping businesses through the pandemic. The Chamber's Access Student Talent Program is available to any business. So whether you're a chamber or a non-chamber, we're happy to help you. So please feel free to reach out. Our focus is on educating, researching, and connecting. And so we provide information to small businesses about working with students, about all the different ways that you can work with students. We will talk with you about what your business needs are, and then we will do the research and go to our 3 post-secondary schools locally to figure out what options you might have for working with a student. We'll summarize that and send it back to you. And if there's an option that you would like to explore further, then we're happy to connect you with the right people. And some of those people that you would be connected with are joining me today. So again, if you're interested in learning more about working with students, please feel free to reach out to me. Today's discussion, like I said, is focused on what students have been doing to help businesses through the pandemic. And so COVID has had a significant impact on organizations and our post-secondary institutions. And so I wanted to start today's discussion with how has your school adapted the work integrated learning opportunities during the pandemic? And so we'll start today's discussion with Linda.
Thank you, Allison. I think the biggest thing that happened was back in March when the emergency was declared by the province, and we halted our field placements in particular right away. There was a little warning there with co-op students because they were with employers, but many co-op employment jobs also halted. So we had to sort of act very quickly. So one of the things that has resulted is an increased number of remote placements. So employers have adapted to allowing students to work from home and created opportunities that may not have existed before that can happen remotely. We had to change how some of our students completed their field placements. So they may have had to do a combination of working directly with employers plus doing work not directly with employers, but in order to reach their learning objectives. We've actually connected with employers in different ways as well, and instead of a student actually going to an employer, the employer might come to the classroom to provide students with information. They may do interviews or provide a guest speaker role to a class. So connecting with the employer community in that way has happened. We've had a lot of employers starting to focus on sort of different work for students. Things like marketing, social media presence, web content, web management, turning things from being live action to online, like appointment scheduler or ordering or ticketing, that kind of thing. We've had students work on moving events that were required to, or were formerly face-to-face and change those to be remotely delivered. We've also had a bit of an increase in students being asked to do research for companies. So being able to go out and do some research work, provide results for the employer that they may not have an opportunity to do with their regular complement of staff. We have had to increase our safety protocols with respect to students, particularly who are going still to on-site placement. So we're asking that employers confirm with us that they're following public health protocols as related to the pandemic. The other thing that's been a fairly major change is with respect to co-op. The employers that have been unable to take students for a full semester, for example, we have been able to accommodate shorter work terms during the pandemic. So those are the major changes that have been happening at Conestoga.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. And Scott, what's Laurier done to kind of change how work integrated learning is happening?
Absolutely, yeah. And sort of echoing Linda's statements there, you know, like all businesses, all schools were in the same boat, especially when we first got hit with this back in March. It's okay, how do we maintain status quo? How do we adapt? How do we change? How do we, you know, make sure that we're still resilient and supporting students and supporting businesses at the same time? And what we noticed is a lot of hesitancy from businesses at first to say, hey, you know, maybe if they were offering a co-op student placement for the summertime that was coming up, they were a bit more hesitant to bringing somebody on because they realized, hey, we can't do this in the normal capacity. Well, nobody was working in the normal capacity, and we sort of all adjusted at the same time. And we tried to develop a framework for, okay, how can our students best support businesses, and how can our businesses best support our students together through these trying times? So we really like shifted, you know, I mean, everything was shifted online for the most part. If we were doing any in-person placements, those were primarily shifted online, unless both the student and the business had a really strong case of, hey, we need this work to be done in person, or this project to be facilitated in person. And if everybody was comfortable with it, if all the safety measures were all above board and the boxes, then we could go ahead with that. But pretty much everything was sent online, much like everything business related. So that's one thing that really impacted was, how are we going to change? How are we going to adapt? And, you know, we noticed a lot of resiliency with the students and the businesses that we are working with. I'm proud to say that, you know, students are still getting their placements. Businesses are still able to offer these. Maybe it was shifted from what they initially thought they were going to do. And I think that might be a misconception from like the business side of things, is if we lock something in with an institution right from the get-go, we have to stick with that. But, you know, we're being very flexible as well, and in working with other, you know, projects that faculty are developing and that we were working on, you know, these had to change rapidly. They had to go from in-person placements or projects to totally remote. So I think just being able to play all on the same team and making sure that everybody's, you know, happy with the work that we're doing, is going to get something significant out of it. Those are two of the big things that we're really focusing on. And at the beginning, you know, the focus was a lot on how to shift in COVID times, you know, very COVID focused, a lot of research done on COVID. And then we started noticing, you know, students are getting COVID fatigue. All of their classes, all of their experiences have a lot to do with, okay, let's research the COVID stuff and how other businesses are adapting. It's nice to sort of see how this has progressed over the year, and how we're kind of moving out of this, and we're developing different protocols, you know, with COVID restrictions, but that being less on the mind and more of, okay, how do we get business back to normal, and what does normal really look like? We're seeing a lot of these sort of case studies and projects and different placements coming out. So I think, yeah, my lasting statement with that is just how we are adapting, and how classes have adapted, how the co-op program has adapted, all from being so in person to, you know, how do we do a hybrid of this? How do we make sure that everybody's still satisfied and the work is getting done? And how do we make meaningful experiences for everybody at the same time? And it's nice to be part of some movement that is really, you know, changing this, and seeing how businesses are changing and adapting through this time. So I don't want to take too much more of what Mark might be able to say, but I feel like a lot of our schools are doing similar things, and it's nice to see how students are still being supported, and the businesses are still getting that access to the student talent there.
Great, thank you so much, Scott. And Mark, tell us what's happening at the University of Waterloo.
Yeah, thanks so much, Allison, and thanks to Linda and Scott. Yeah, you know, a lot of the things that that they've already mentioned certainly are things that we all had to react to. First of all, when it hit in March, we had to bring our students home from work terms, frankly, all over the world, and get them back home safely, and pivot right then to them learning then how to work remotely online right from the get-go. The really great thing about students is that they're so resilient, and they're used to, this is a generation that's grown up looking at a computer and using their computers and using technology to talk to each other. So for the most part, a very smooth transition, I'd say, probably for all of our schools in terms of that piece. And really the opportunity to then work with our employers to embrace that and to feel comfortable with that. So that's been kind of a really interesting but really good transition, I think, for all of us. One of the other things that UW looked at was how can we really be an impact to the economy? What are the things that employers are needing most right now in terms of the skills that they need to do to adapt their companies to be able to succeed in the new world that we're in? So one of the things that we did was we partnered with our Stratford Global Business Digital Arts Program, and with Larry Smith, who's the director of the Problem Lab, with Vidyard, Shopify, Deloitte, and the Kite Academy. And we came up with a group of courses that our students could take regardless of the program that they were in. They could be in our kinesiology program and take courses such as digital marketing, web design, videography, e-commerce, how to put e-commerce onto a website, learning how to do sales effectively. So these courses were offered, as I said, free of charge to our entire student population. And so we've got this whole group of students that have learned new skills and that are now able to help small businesses update their websites, make a video of their products and services, help them with their social media, enable them to be linked to larger platforms like Digital Main Street, like Shop Local KW, like Shopify, so that their goods and services can be seen in a whole new way to a whole new group of people, and enabling such things as online ordering and curbside delivery. And those are some really great things that I think have enabled students to learn a whole set of skills that they never imagined probably that they were going to need or were looking to take while they're in school, but have really been good both for them and certainly for economy. So we're really excited about that. And the same as what Linda and Scott said, we've become much more flexible with the length of a work term. So students now can have a work term anywhere from 8 weeks in length to our typical 16 weeks in length. And the thing that has really been so helpful for all of our schools, I know, has been the opportunity to access funding that has never been available before. And it's really helped those small businesses who probably thought that they may not be able to afford to take on a student at the moment, be able to do so. So it's been that whole kind of partnership piece where we are all in this together, and let's think of ways where we can help our students be successful, help our businesses be successful, and let's get this economy rolling again. And that whole piece has been really great and really wonderful to see.
That's great. Thanks so much, Mark. And so, I know that I've heard over the last few months some really great examples of how students have been helping businesses through the pandemic. And so I'm wondering if each of you can provide us with some examples, because I think, once other businesses hear about specific examples and projects that students have been helping businesses with, then there's some light bulb moments that may go off for them, or they may say, hey, I could use that in my business. And so if we could take some time to just kind of talk about what are those things that students have been doing to help businesses through the pandemic. And so we'll start with Scott, please.
Absolutely. So, essentially it's what what we're looking at is what is the problem the business is having. So in my role right now, I support classrooms developing these experiential learning opportunities with businesses. So students who aren't in co-op and don't have that other experience, they can still get this business-related experience through their class. But as previously mentioned, I've worked in the co-op office, and we're all sort of under that same umbrella of experiential learning. So there's a bunch of different ways that I've seen this happen. And the first thing that we like to look at is what does the business need? What do they really want to get out of this? And so we really like to start with that. And throughout the past, I guess, year or so now, it was a lot of, social media. How do we get our day-to-day operations that have just been storefront a lot of the time? How do we get this out to the population where, you might have somebody who is a great business owner, but they don't have these social media sort of tech skills behind the scenes. So they're looking at either hiring a student part-time for that, looking at some co-op opportunities because they have some of that funding available for them. So hiring somebody like that. And we also have a course at Lauriate's social media marketing course, where we welcome five different businesses, typically small businesses, each term within the fall and the winter term. And the students, they act as a mini consulting group. So we have our businesses come in and they let the students know, okay, this is what we do, this is what we're sort of looking for. We don't have a great idea about social media, but this is kind of the direction that we're hoping we can go in. And students will take a look at this, they'll analyze some competition, and they'll actually create at the end of the term a social media content calendar for a business. And we've seen this, it's been a wonderful class to work with, and the students really like doing this for the employer, and they're getting course credit for it, which is wonderful. They're having some fun, they're making some connections with businesses. And throughout this course, we've seen, there's one small business, Empower Chiropractic, and small business, one owner, he does everything. She came to me, she's like, hey, I need help with social media. So I plunked her into this class. She hired 3 interns after the fact, and they're actually just graduating this term. So she came back to me yesterday and she's like, hey, Scott, do you have any more students for me? So it's neat to kind of see the way that things can operate. You can be partnered with a class, you meet a couple of students, and then you end up hiring them. So things can go many different ways. Within our co-op stream, I know we're working with a bunch of different businesses. Students can fill the roles of social media coordinator, opportunity development, so they can be managing sales, incoming, outbound sales, financial analyst, you name it, we sort of have it. But we really like to look at the business, have a sit down and say, hey, what do you want most out of this? And we kind of have those talks and walk through with that regard. So it's really the opportunities are endless, especially within the region with their 3 institutions, of having very niche markets of what students and what programs we have to offer. So we're really fortunate to have these different opportunities, and yeah, it's basically opening that door for that conversation of what do you really need and how can we help you.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. And I'll say that I, at the end of, I think last semester, I sat in on some of the student presentations for the social media class, and they were presenting their social media plans to the businesses that they had been working with. And these are small businesses that don't necessarily have social media or marketing expertise in-house. And so I was absolutely blown away with the presentations and the suggestions that the student had just on how the business can move forward with their social media plan. The students gave the business some great actionable items that they could implement almost immediately with kind of very little expertise. So the students kind of walk them through how they would implement it. And these are things that often would take some time to figure out on their own, but if you can get a student on board to help you create the social media plan and kind of lay it out what steps that you would need to do in order to implement it, it can have a massive impact on your business, especially in a time when we've really been focused on virtual. So In particular, that particular class, I've seen some really great work out of the students, and so that's a pretty exciting example. So thank you, Scott. Mark, can you share with us some examples of how students from Waterloo have been helping businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many really interesting examples, and I actually spoke to a few of our student advisors to see what great stories that they've had over the last 8 months from our students. And there's one really interesting one, which was an events company that has always hired our students and has had them work remotely for them. The job has always been remote, really interestingly. And what the student was able to do in terms of researching what platforms are out there to run events. I mean, an events company, that's one where you go, oh my goodness, they've been really, really hard hit by COVID. But the student was able to do research, introduce them to various platforms that are available for them to keep events running online, help and trained their staff members on how to be running these events, how to maximize networking, et cetera. And they are thrilled that they've really been able to kind of turn their business around and be really successful in that area. So that was an exciting story. We have students that are working in the manufacturing sector who are working remotely in engineering jobs, who are really able to even remotely contribute to how to improve process. Like, it's a great time for companies to be looking at process improvement, and whether that's through data analysis or looking at how their line is working, et cetera. And really great stories around manufacturing success, and really that data is key, and data is what they're now having time to work on some of those projects that maybe before they didn't necessarily have that time to do. So that's a great story. Also, we had a student working in a physiotherapy office, which is a really hands-on job. Typically, the student had been hired to do kind of that hands-on work with clients, and they had to help the company pivot to offering online services. So they made some videos, how to do different exercises and things. They helped them with their website in terms of setting online scheduling up, figuring out, again, the platforms and that they were using, because they were the person in the office that felt the most comfortable in learning those platforms and in training the other staff in that. We also I'll do one last one. We had a student that was working in a walk-in clinic, and they've always held that job. That particular clinic actually pivoted to being a COVID testing clinic. So they had to learn all the protocol around that, how to do triage, and such things as how to arrange patient transportation for people that didn't have a safe way of getting to the appointment and getting back again. And the walk-in clinic is thrilled with the students that we've been able to bring in there and that are continuing that work. So it's exciting to hear these stories from all the different schools about just the difference that students are making to these organizations.
Thanks so much, Mark. It is. I mean, the students are getting amazing experience, and the businesses are getting support in areas where they may not have resources internally, which is allowing them to be more productive and hopefully weather the pandemic a little easier. Linda, can you share with us some examples from Conestoga? Oh, you're on mute.
Muted myself, get rid of the background noise. We have some great examples from Conestoga. A student was able to design and execute a store planogram, and that helped to improve customer flow within the store and improve social distancing for an organization. So that was a great example. We have students who've been doing video content development for multiple outputs. things like advertising campaigns, website content, social media, and they've also been creating instructional videos, for training purposes. So an example is creating, student created a number of videos in order to show customers how to take care of their hot tub. Student in our events management program was hired to actually convert an event that traditionally has happened annually online or in face-to-face, and they converted it to an online event. We have a student in software engineering technology co-op who was able to take a website and turn it into a mobile-friendly website. So they did the plan for it, they wrote the code and did testing and rolled that out. We have students who have done customer correspondence, such as creating and executing mail campaigns. We have students conducting market research for employers so they can identify a customer base and create marketing solutions specific to that customer base, create the marketing plans for the employer. We've had students working to augment existing marketing plans, so things like creation of content for YouTube, for Twitter, for feedback, and for Facebook, and doing blogging, for example. So the students were able to create content that might be new for an existing platform. And just my final example is creating media relations plans. So identifying media partners, creating media kits, web and social media contacts, preparing news releases to fulfill a media relations need of an organization.
That's great. Thank you so much, Linda. I mean, it's so great to hear that the schools have been flexible in terms of the different types of work integrated learning opportunities that are available, and to hear all of the examples of how the students have been helping businesses is amazing. I know that through our program, we often get requests for assistance with things like marketing and social media because, you know, being digital has never been more important. I think it's going to be something that is of great importance moving forward, as well as, you know, that communication with your customers. Marg, you mentioned an example of manufacturing and streamlining processes, and finding those efficiencies are going to be super important as well. And it's just great to know that there are resources at our local post-secondary schools where students can help businesses with all of these things. And so I want to remind those who are listening to us that if you have questions for our panelists, please put your questions into the chat, and we will, I'll be happy to ask the questions of our panelists. I just wanted to ask the panel, you know, as businesses are maybe hearing about all these great examples and they're thinking, oh, that might be something that I would be interested in exploring, can each of you talk about the timeline? So as they're planning, like how far in advance should they be talking with a school about some of their interest in working with students? And are there different timelines for different types of work integrated learning opportunities? Maybe I'll start with you, Marg.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, I like to say that we recruit all the time. there's never a time that we're not recruiting. I mean, right now we're actually still helping students find jobs for the winter term. So there's still an opportunity if people need someone right now that they can contact us and we can help them find an 8-week co-op job or a flexible work term at the moment. And we're also recruiting at the same time for the spring term. By mid-May, we'll be starting to recruit for the fall term. So as I said, really, what's important is for employers to get in touch with us now and ask those questions, and we can walk them through those conversations about when it might be best for them to start recruiting in terms of whether it's something they're looking for that's project-based or that they need immediate help. We can always help them one way or another, whether again it's through co-op or we have something called an other board where you can post contract opportunities, part-time roles, etc., that is available all the time. So reach out to us. I think is the most important piece to do, and we'll kind of guide you in the direction of where you might want to be looking to start recruiting.
Okay, great. Linda, can you talk about some of the timelines in terms of field placements or the other types of will?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, when we engage with an employer, we try to figure out which is the best work integrated learning opportunity to fit with the needs of the employer. And like Mark said, we still have co-op positions available for the winter term. We still have field placement opportunities for the winter semester. And again, to just echo what Mark has said, we would like to engage with employers to have those conversations about when students might be available. Our largest semester for co-op would be in the spring-summer semester. Our largest semester for field placement is the winter semester, so currently. But we have opportunities available year-round. And those opportunities are largely dependent on the program that a student's in, because their co-op opportunity or their field placement opportunity would happen as part of their program design, so it would happen at a particular time. So depending on what the employer needs, we can do our best to find a student who is suitable for a field placement or a co-op or a capstone project or whatever the work integrated learning opportunity is.
Great, thanks, Linda. And I was just in contact with one of your field placement officers yesterday, and I know that they're still looking for businesses to take on a public relations placement student, an office admin placement student. So if there's anybody, any business who is listening to the webinar now, and that's something that might be of interest, particularly, you know, the public relations, if you're looking for assistance with some writing or communications, then that might be a great option for you. And I think that happens March timeframe. Scott, do you have anything to add from a timeline or planning perspective?
Yeah, so at Laurier, so in my role dealing with courses, the sweet spot is typically between 3 to 4 months out. We work on like a revolving, rotating semester system. So we're looking ahead a couple months to see what's on deck for next semester. So if you're looking to engage in a course specifically, typically the 3 to 4 month timeline is kind of what we're looking at. We have had businesses come in and work with our students in the class, you know, a couple days before the class has started. So sometimes things just really whip up really quickly. But the more sort of foresight we have, the easier it is to plan and implement what we're really looking at into the course syllabus. So in dealing with courses, it's a little bit different. I know, you know, the co-op, as you guys had mentioned as well, it's, you know, the students are still seeking right now, and we're being very flexible with their hours and how things are coming about. In terms of if there's any folks who are sort of like science-based in sort of like active communities, we have these kinesiology leadership hours that students are always looking for. So our students in kin, they have to get 96 hours of sort of community involvement. Whether that's, you know, at, you know, chiropractic clinic or something like that. Students get that community experience through there, and they're always posting. We do also have a system where current Laurier students and graduates can go into, and they can look for full-time or part-time jobs or volunteer opportunities. So if you have something that is in mind, all you need to do is just reach out, and we can try and figure out with you where it's going to be. So I think the best advice that I could give to the businesses is just, maybe you don't know exactly what you want. You might have an idea. Just come in and chat with us, and we can try and figure out how are we going to plunk this and what will be the best for both of us. So if you just have that little spark, we're happy to have that conversation. And if it's a year out from what you're looking for, that's fine too. And if it's a couple of days out from when you need to get something done, we can roll with that. So there's an army of people, within here who are looking to support you. So just reach out and we can figure that out. So timeline is less important to us. You might not just get into a specific class or a specific program at that desired time right off the bat if it's a little too late, but there's always next term. There's always going to be school next term, knock on wood. So just reach out and we can figure something out.
Great, thanks so much, Scott. So you each talked about, the fact that a lot of the students who are working with businesses are doing so remotely. And I know that we've certainly gotten questions from businesses in terms of, how do you onboard a student remotely? So it's a little bit different than, if you were to have a student come into the office. I'm just wondering if you can share maybe a couple of tips about best practices that you've heard in terms of onboarding a student remotely. Sorry, I'll ask Linda to go first.
Thanks, Allison. I think one of the tips we would give is just to have a little bit of time at the beginning to spend with the student, getting to know a little bit about their skill set, and having a good outline of what it is you want the student to accomplish. Students are very good at going away and learning on their own, researching, etc. So having a few things that you need to get the students started. Perhaps there's a particular software that they need to know. Perhaps there's a database they need to be familiar with. Let them go and sort of explore and play with that, and just be prepared to introduce them to those things. I think that would be a great tip. Let them know about their support systems. So who they can go to and speak to within the organization to find out how the place works. How will their work contribute to the organization as a whole? So those are a couple of tips that I would say for onboarding students.
Okay, great. Marg, do you have any tips to share?
Yeah, I think Linda certainly hit on a lot of them. I think one of the most important things is that a student does know who their supervisor is and has that person that they can be connecting with. Now our students have been, all of our students, I think, have been through, for the most part, except for first work term students, have been through a few online and remote work terms now. So in many ways, they might feel more comfortable than the employer. I think one of the most important things that the employer can do is to really think about what is it that the student will absolutely need to succeed in this job. Like, do they need a special kind of computer or camera, perhaps? So to kind of think through some of those actual, I'm going to say, hardware pieces that maybe the student needs as well, and they should be supplying those for the students. So to think that piece through. Also, as Linda mentioned, is there some software or a database or something that they're going to need access to? So to think about that. I think that students will be able to help the employers feel comfortable, though, with that piece at that point. But really important that employers are booking, say, a weekly Zoom call or something with their student to make sure that they're keeping track of kind of where they are in terms of their milestones that they're expecting a student to reach, offering that support that's going to be really important for them to be successful. And to sometimes remember that students don't know what they don't know. So to go over those pieces with them so that everything's clear. I think being clear is really important in this environment, and we've all learned that ourselves in our own jobs as well. And I think a really important thing that we know and that we've learned through our co-op Work Learn Institute is that students want to feel valued and they want to feel like they know what they're contributing to at a company. So if employers can keep that piece in mind, that's gonna really make for a successful work term for both the student and the employer. And again, it's that partnership that is so important for both, and that makes for that successful work.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marg. Scott, do you have anything to add?
For sure. So just building on that, I think having some actionable items for the student to be working on right away, having some sort of concrete, not specifically a list, but some to-do things for the student coming in. That way, semesters are short. Students want to hit the ground running. I know whenever we're working with students and businesses, they're so eager and they're so keen to learn. They're so keen to do. Having a list or, sort of just a mindset of what can we get these students working on right off the bat, that'll get things moving and their gears will be turning. They'll be doing a bit more research into what they need to do. So just having that actionable item, list for students, that's really key. And also within this virtual environment, communication is king. So having really strong communication, starting that off from the get-go and building that through each semester, that's really key. I've had a few of my friends, they got new jobs within the pandemic and they're onboarding into a new job totally remote. And they just say, it's crap. They don't know their colleagues. They don't, you don't have that same sort of camaraderie. So, this is their full-time job. For a student, they're coming in, a little more green to this as well. And it's even harder for them to assert themselves within a team. So having that open line of communication and making them feel valued, that goes a long way, especially at the beginning, to really, get their feet under themselves and hit the ground running. So those would be my two biggest tips, I'd say.
Great, thanks, Scott. So we've got some questions coming in, and so I'll start with the first question and maybe get each of you to briefly answer. The question is, we would need a student to work in the office. Is that a problem at this time? Marg, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, we ask that employers have put in place COVID protocols for their the same that they would have in place for their regular employees. They need to make sure that the students know that and that the students feel comfortable. When you work with the student population, we're still working with parents that are also taking a look at the jobs that their students are applying to, and they're going to be asking their students during interviews, or their children during interviews, to ask the employers what things are in place. So I always say to employers, think about those things ahead of time because you are going to be asked about them. And it's important then that a student has kind of knows what they need. Again, it's that let them know what they need. Be very clear about what the expectations are and be open to those conversations with the students so that everybody remains safe in the workplace.
Okay, great. Scott?
Yeah, similarly, we have a whole health and safety department here at Laurier. So we have this big checklist that we need to go over to make sure that things are all following the COVID protocol and following, health and safety guidelines. So short answer is yes, that is possible. It's a bit more, work to get that, but we have to make sure that both parties, so the student and the employer, are all on the same page. And the student knows what they're getting themselves into. And we kind of have a little clause here saying at any point, this can become a remote placement or remote co-op, just in case, COVID numbers spike and we need to bring students back home. So there has to be that sort of out there as well. So a bit more red tape, a bit more paperwork. It is possible. We just need to look into it a bit closer.
Okay, great. And Linda?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. We do have an employer form that we ask states that they are adhering to public health protocols and that they will introduce students to the public health requirements within their own site. But the short answer is yes, on-site placements are absolutely going ahead.
Okay, great. Another question. So Mark, I think you touched on, increased funding opportunities. So we had a question come in, specifically asking a little bit more information about the funding. So maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, so now until March 30th, which happens to be the date of the federal budget day, we know that we have funding in place through the Student Work Placement Program Partners, which is up to 75% of the cost of having a student, or up to $7,500. So that funding, again, we know for sure is in place until March 30th. We're all hoping, every single school is hoping that those programs are going to continue. I can't tell you how critical that has been for us to be able to employ the number of students that we all have been able to. So we're all kind of crossing our fingers on that. After March 30th, it could, what we're assuming could be in place is that it would be from 50 to 70% of the cost of the student, with having it need to be a net new student at that time. But we do not know, none of us know. So we're anxiously awaiting word on that. I will quickly say, though, we are partnering with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce to leverage funding and help get students employed. We have a joint webinar with them on February 17th from 1:30 to 2:30. I'd be happy to connect with people about learning more about that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. And I've actually gone through the application process of getting some SWIP funding. I can say that it's a very easy application process, and having that funding available was super helpful, and it's great for businesses. Linda or Scott, do you have anything to add on funding, or can we move to the next question? Okay. So we had a question come in. Are there any specific documents or details that businesses should have in place before connecting with any schools regarding student work opportunities? And so I think this might be a little bit different for every school, so we'll just kind of go around briefly. Linda, do you want to start?
Sure. In particular for unpaid placement, we require an affiliation agreement to be signed. We would also require proof of general liability insurance, so we ask for an insurance certificate. And because the Ministry of Colleges and Universities funds workplace insurance for students in unpaid work placements, we need to know whether the organization is a WSIB funded or WSIB organization, or not a WSIB organization. Either way, it doesn't matter. The workplace insurance is still provided by MCU. So those are the three things that we would need in advance of a student starting the placement.
Okay, great. Scott.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we have here as well, and we run employers through a checklist as well, with health and safety protocol now. Okay. So on top of that, so depends on the experience, but those are all very similar forms.
Okay, and Mark, same.
Yeah, very, very similar. Again, so in terms of the insurance and all that as well, we also want to make sure that that we have kind of gone through the vetting process with the employer to know, that you have the supervisor in place for the student, and kind of that clear, set of expectations in place. It's really important to think about. And that's what all of us will help you with in terms of going through those questions with them and helping employers think ahead of time. What do I need to have in place before I bring a student in? And we'll also let you know the supports that we have to help the employer be successful with those things as well.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. And just a point of clarification that a business, you don't need to kind of have those documents all in a package in order to initiate the conversations with us or with any of the schools. Like Mark said, they'll help you kind of work through all of that. They'll let you know specifically what documentation, what information they need. And so, feel free to reach out, and then each of the schools or myself, we can direct you to the appropriate person and have those conversations. So we are pretty close to the end of our time. I want to thank you so much, Scott, Linda, and Marg, for joining me today, for talking about all of the examples, all the great examples of how students have been helping businesses through this really, really difficult time. We've heard how businesses are getting some resources that they much need, and students are getting some really, really great skills. And so it's a really great partnership, and we're happy to highlight this, and we're happy to continue to talk to businesses and connect them with post-secondary students. I want to thank our sponsors. Our title sponsor is Manulife. Our platinum sponsor of the series is the Immigration Partnership. This month's presenting sponsor is Future Focus Inc. Michael spoke with us at the beginning of the webinar. Again, a huge thank you to today's speakers, Marg, Linda, and Scott. Finally, to all of you for joining us, thank you so much. As a reminder, we do host the Business Success Series every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Join us for our webinar next week. It's called the Working Together Project, a creative approach to accessing immigrant and refugee talent. We hope that we'll see you then. Please feel free to register for that webinar on our website. Please share this series with your friends and colleagues. Like I said, it runs every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. It is brought to you by the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce, as well as our title sponsor, Manulife, our platinum sponsor, the Immigration Partnership, and February's presenting sponsor, Future Focus Inc. Because it's Wednesday, it's a Business Success Series. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.